Good afternoon, everyone. We are live here at My Therapy NYC, ready for today's free webinar. I'm very excited that you all could join us. And I'm coming to you from My Therapy NYC, which is a mental health and wellness service here in New York City. And this is part of the services that we are providing to everyone. And it's a great resource that we can use to reach more people than here in NYC. So my name is Matt Cartwright, and I am a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a psychotherapist here at My Therapy NYC. And throughout the years, one of the things that I've been dealing with is shame. So I've been doing a lot of research and a lot of studying, and I've come across some great information that I think is very valuable to share with everyone. So that's what this webinar today is going to be about, teaching you to understand shame, your shame triggers, talking about perfectionism, courage, compassion, and learning to live authentically. So if you look to the right, there is a place for you to ask questions. Feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, we'll get to them at the end, but let's go ahead and get started and get right to the information. Let me just pull up the PowerPoint. And here we go. I hope everyone can see this. So today is about learning to live courageously in your life so that you can really just have your dreams manifest. So what we're going to do today is we're going to define shame. We're going to help you understand your shame shields. We're going to talk about perfectionism, being authentic, and we're also going to explore vulnerability, which I know can bring up a lot of issues for people. So I always start out by asking people a simple question. The question is, who do you get to be? And the reason why I use the word get is because it's a choice. Every day we have a choice to decide who we're going to be. So who you get to be is up to you. But in order for you to be that, you're going to have to make some decisions about how to live differently. So that brings me to the question that people often ask me is like, why do we have to talk about shame? Nobody wants to talk about shame. But the truth is, if we don't talk about it, then it's going to run our lives. Shame is a core feeling that we all have, and it's something that many of us struggle with. We all struggle with it, really. So in order to move through it, we have to talk about it. So let's talk about what is shame. Shame is that warm feeling that washes over us, making us feel small, flawed, and never good enough. Anytime you hear yourself saying, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, you can guarantee that that is shame. Shame is also keeping us from our worthiness. It tries to convince us that owning our own stories will lead people to think less of us. If I tell you who I am, you're not going to like me. That's shame. Shame is all about fear. We're afraid that people won't like us if they know the truth about who we are. But let me tell you something. Who you are is magnificent. Who you are is beautiful. Who you are is worthy. And when you can really get to that place of embracing that, you can start to build up some shame resilience. Shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. This quote comes from Brene Brown. Brene Brown is a shame researcher. I've been trained with Brene to be a certified Daring Way facilitator candidate. And most of the information that we're going to be talking about today comes directly from Brene, which I'll mention her at the end of our presentation today. I also want to just talk to you about what causes shame. Each one of us has different experiences that create shame in our life. And as you can see, here are the 12 shame categories: appearance, body image, money, work, motherhood, fatherhood, family, parenting, mental and physical health, addiction, sex, aging, religion, surviving trauma, or being stereotyped or labeled. Shame really gets to the core of our self-worth. Shame is the fear of disconnection. And the truth is, we're hardwired for connection. But when we have these different categories, we feel like, oh, if my body's not good enough, then people won't like me and I won't have connection. If I don't have enough money, if as I'm getting older, many of us are, challenged with aging. We're feeling shame that we're not fitting into the norm of this younger, prettier, more tech-savvy culture. I think we might put some shame categories in there about learning how to use all the new technology that's coming out. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to recognize that while we have shame, we can build some resilience. The truth is that we're all going to experience shame. We're all going to experience these feelings. How we transcend and transform them is by building resilience. Shame resilience. We all have shame. It's universal, it's primitive, it's an emotion that each one of us goes through. And the only people who don't experience it, really, those are the ones who lack a capacity for empathy and human connection. And hopefully you don't know any of those people in your life, but it may bring up some people that you know who really, they just seem to lack connection. But each one of you, I'm sure, is working on building connection, and by talking about shame, by owning your story, you can really build resilience. We're all afraid to talk about it. Nobody wants to be going to their friends and saying, hey, I'm feeling ashamed, or we want to hide it. We want to deny it. We want to rationalize it or justify it. But the less we talk about it, the more control it has over our lives. So shame is really the fear that we're unlovable. It's the total opposite of feeling worthy. And when we're feeling shame, we will do things to protect us. We will utilize what are called shame shields. And there are 3 shame shields. The first shame shield is when we have this intensely warm feeling rush over us and we shut down, or we isolate, or we keep quiet, or we move away. The second shame shield is when we are trying to people please. We are trying to make things better. We are putting other people's needs ahead of ours because we're feeling ashamed. So that's when we're moving towards. And the third one is when we'll get defensive, or we'll get angry, or we'll blame and project onto others. And that shame shield is called moving against. And the real purpose of identifying these shame shields is when I recognize that I'm behaving in this way, I can go straight to, oh, I'm feeling shame. That's what that is. And when I take a moment to feel the shame and really connect with it, let that emotion pass through me, then I come from a higher place. Then I come from a more courageous place. Then I'm able to share and express it with others, and I'm able to be more vulnerable. So the steps really to combat shame are that we recognize shame, and we identify the triggers. We recognize the shame shields, And then we really have to practice a critical awareness by really getting in there and just asking ourselves, is this true? What we're experiencing, is it true what's happening? So we're really just working to then reach out and tell somebody. We want to reach out and connect with people so that we don't feel alone. Shame loves for us to be alone. It loves for us to hide, and it does not want us to talk about our feelings. If you can practice these 4 steps to combat shame, then you are going to build shame resilience. The one thing that Brene often talks about is she says, the people who have shame resilience, it's not that they don't have any troubles, that their life is perfect and they don't feel shame. It's just that they know when they feel shame that their worthiness is not on the table. Shame says, I am bad. I am not enough. And when you know that no matter what happens, your worth is not on the table, you'll be able to respond differently in your life. You'll be able to connect differently, and you'll be able to build closer relationships. So that brings us to perfectionism. Brene says that when perfectionism is driving, shame is riding shotgun, as fear is the backseat driver. Perfectionism is that it's not the same thing as striving to be your best. Perfectionism is not about healthy achievement and growth. Perfectionism is really the belief that if we look perfect, act perfect, think perfect, speak perfect, if we do everything perfectly, we can minimize or avoid pain, the pain of blame, judgment, and shame. It's really a defense to feeling shame. And the other thing is that perfectionism is really self-destructive because there's no such thing as perfect. It's unattainable. It's really more about a perception and a need and a want to be perceived as perfect than it is about really striving to do your best and putting your best foot forward. Perfectionism is also very addictive because invariably we're going to experience shame. We're going to experience judgment. There's going to be blame. But when this happens, we often believe it's because we weren't perfect enough. There's that not blank enoughness again, because we live in this culture of scarcity. There's not enough this, there's not enough that. And when we're striving to be perfect, it's really, really tricky, because when you inevitably make a mistake, then you're going to think it's because you weren't perfect enough. I often tell people there's no mistakes. There are only learning lessons. Anna Quinlan says, the thing that is really hard and really amazing is giving up on being perfect and beginning the work of becoming yourself. That's what we're here today to talk about, is becoming yourself, your authentic self, your vibrant self, becoming that true self that you were born to be, that knowing that each one of you has a gift to offer, and your job is to do the inner work to let that gift come through so that you can connect with other people. So how do we do that? We cultivate authenticity. We let go of what people think. I know it's hard. Listen, I know it's hard. Everybody's on the Twitter and the Facebook telling everybody what they think. And it's really hard not to compare ourselves and say, oh, look, Sally just went to the Bahamas and I'm stuck at this crappy ass job. But that's the way to freedom. That's the way to intimacy. That's the way to really just enjoying this precious life that you've been given. So how are we going to cultivate authenticity? Authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It's a choice. It's about that real choice to be vulnerable and courageous and show up, to show up and be your authentic self. It's about, and it's a practice. Everything that we're talking about today here is not something you're just going to learn and get and your life's going to be hunky-dory. It's about really committing to the practice that today I'm going to be authentic. I'm going to let go of what people think I'm supposed to be, and I'm going to embrace who I really am. I'm going to choose authenticity by cultivating courage to be imperfect and to set boundaries and to allow myself to be vulnerable. I'm going to exercise the compassion to know that we're all made of strength and struggle. And I'm going to nurture that sense of belonging that can happen when I believe that I am enough. Authenticity is the path to freedom. It is the path that allows you, authenticity demands wholehearted living and loving, even when it's hard, even when you're wrestling with the shame and fear of not being good enough. And especially when you're doing this, when you're mindfully practicing authenticity, this is what's going to invite grace and joy and gratitude into your life. E.E. Cummings says that to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you be everybody but yourself means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight and never stop fighting. Staying real is one of the most courageous battles that you will ever fight. And I would say it's one of the most rewarding battles that you will ever win. But the truth is, if you trade in your authenticity for playing safe and playing small, then that's what leads to anxiety, depression, eating disorders, addiction, rage, blame, resentment, and inexplicable grief. That's why this is so important, and that's my purpose for doing this webinar today, is so that we can really teach people how to embrace themselves. There's so many messages that we get from the world that tell us what we're not, and I'm here to tell you who you get to be is up to you. So let's look at, who do you choose to be? Are you choosing today to be authentic? Are you choosing today to be grateful and to be compassionate? Are you choosing today to live vibrantly and to really take in how wonderful life is? I surely hope so. I surely hope that that's the message that you're getting today, that it's really possible. But in order to do that, we have to choose the victory and not the victim story. We have to look at, are we being courageous? How are we connecting with others? Am I practicing compassion for myself and for others? Because practicing courage, compassion, and connection in our daily lives is how we cultivate worthiness. That sense of self-worth, that's what's going to combat shame. Courage. The root of the word courage, it's a Latin word, and it was originally meant to speak one's mind by telling of one's heart. Courage comes from your heart. It's not about being brave, it's about sharing who you are authentically. And that requires that you be vulnerable. Pema Chodron says that when we practice generating compassion, we can expect to experience the fear of our pain. Compassion practice is daring. It involves learning to relax and allow ourselves to move gently towards what scares us. I know that shame is scary. I know that it's very frightening to stand up in a group of people and say, I don't agree. That's not my experience. But when you're able to stand with courage and be compassionate to yourself when you make a mistake, then that's going to allow you to have connection, which is that energy that exists between people when they feel seen, when they feel heard and valued, and when they give and receive without judgment. And then they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. I hope that each one of you out there has this vibrant connection in your life that just gives you courage when you're feeling down, that you have someone to turn to, that you can share your shame stories when you've owned them, that you feel safe, because that's what makes life worth living. We are hardwired for connection. All the research indicates that we are wired to connect with each other. And we'll talk about this when we talk about vulnerability here. Because what is vulnerability? Vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It is the core of all of our emotions and feelings. To feel is to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is the birthplace of loving, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is, it sounds like it's vulnerability sounds like it's being exposing ourselves too much, but it's really the juice from which we connect with each other. Our willingness to own and engage with our own vulnerability determines the depth of our courage and the clarity of our purpose. The level to which we protect ourselves from being vulnerable is a measure of our fear and disconnection. Many people have some myths about vulnerability, of what they think vulnerability is. They think vulnerability is a weakness. That is a myth, because vulnerability takes a huge amount of courage. It takes a huge amount of courage to share yourself with someone, to share your emotional experience, to say, you know what, that hurt when I was talked to that way. It takes a huge amount of vulnerability to stand up for yourself and say, no, that doesn't work for me. It's not a weakness, it's actually a sign of strength. People think that, well, I can just opt out of vulnerability. That's not true. We're all in this together. By the definition of being alive is being vulnerable, because at any minute, we don't know what could happen. Our life is so fragile, so there's no choice for us to opt out of vulnerability. People sometimes think that vulnerability is oversharing. Ooh, child, let me tell you about how I was this, happened to me when I was a kid. And, my mama did this, my daddy did this. Oh, I'm sorry, what's your name? People think that if we share all this information about ourselves with strangers or with people we just met, that we're really being vulnerable. The truth is, when that happens, we typically have a vulnerability hangover because we've shared too much. We have shared with people who have not earned the right to hear our story. And people think that we can practice vulnerability in isolation. Not true. Because what I do affects you, and what you do affects me. I just want to tell you that in all this work, we're really trying to get people to live with their whole sense of being, to live wholeheartedly and engage in their lives from a place of worthiness. This means that we have to cultivate courage. We have to cultivate compassion and connection, and wake up each morning thinking that no matter what gets done or how much is left out, I'm still enough, that it's going to be all right, that I'm worthy, that when I go to bed, I may be thinking, I may be imperfect and I may mess it up sometimes, and I may be afraid and I may experience all these things in life, but that doesn't affect my worthiness. And it doesn't change the truth that I am also brave and worthy of love and belonging. So I just want to ask you again, after hearing this information, to think about who you get to be today, who you're going to choose to be, because you can, because you are valuable, because you do have a place at the table and something to offer. This is a choice that you get to wake up every day and practice, and I hope that it is a choice that you make today, because it will only bring more value to your life and to the people around you. I just want to again give a shout out to Brene Brown in her book Daring Greatly, which the majority of this PowerPoint presentation was taken from her book Daring Greatly. So I want to give her credit for the information. And so that leaves me to see if anybody out there has some questions about the material that was presented. I know that this can bring up a lot of fear and understanding, and I know that I put a lot of information out there in a relatively short amount of time. This information is compacted into 30 minutes when I actually do workshops that are a full day long, and I work with people on a regular basis over a long period of time to get people to really understand this information. So I have a question. Do you think there is a part of shame, though, that is actually instructive, in that it helps us to notice areas of our lives that we need that we think we need improvement, or it is just the way it is, or is it just the way we convey that to ourselves? Well, here's what I have to say. Yes, shame can be constructive in that when I recognize the feeling, it allows me to understand some of the thinking. So if I'm feeling shame, it's going to help me to take action to be compassionate with myself, because we all make mistakes. By recognizing that I'm feeling shame, I can recognize that, hey, I might need to work on my worthiness here. This is when I'm feeling shame, it also might tell me, hey, maybe I need to do some different behaviors. So it can be beneficial, but when it turns into perfectionism, or when it turns into a shame shield and I don't want to talk about it, that's when it can be unbeneficial. I'm not going to say destructive, but the truth is it can really be destructive. It can, when we don't feel the shame, it can lead again to the addiction, anxiety, depression. So by having a relationship with shame, I no longer am afraid. There have been times in my life where something has happened and I noticed that I was using a shame shield, that I was moving against someone because I was trying to defend myself. And when I took a moment and said, oh, wow, that was a shame shield, I was really feeling ashamed. I was thinking that because I had done something wrong, that I was wrong, and that's why I was feeling that way. And I actually shared that with the person. I was able to create intimacy. I was able to create a closer connection with the person that I was sharing with. So we're almost out of time, and I would really love to hear if you have any more questions. I know that I can't get to all the questions today, but if you want to go to our website and check out www.mytherapynyc. On the website, there are blogs. There's another webinar coming up next month. We provide newsletters with helpful mental health tips. You can read some of my past logs where I talk about how to combat shame, forgiveness, perfectionism. Or at the website, you can also email us any questions. You can go to the Facebook page and ask questions on that, and I'll be happy to answer any question that you have. But I really just want to take a moment and thank you all for showing up today, for taking time out of your day to be with me and to share this information. And if I can be of any service anyway, please reach out at www.mytherapynyc.com. And I look forward to hearing from you all very soon. Also look out in the next couple of months. I will be doing a full workshop that you can attend on this same information on how to live courageously, let go of shame, and embrace your authentic self. So have a great day. Thank you all for coming. Talk to you soon.